This is Market Pathways, your premium guide to global medical device regulation, reimbursement, and policy. Become a part of the global MedTech community at mystrategist.com.
Welcome back to the Market Pathways podcast. I'm David Fillmore, editor of Market Pathways. It's been a while since I've been on the podcast, but I'm happy to be in the seat again. In today's episode, you'll hear a conversation I had at the recent MedTech Strategist Innovation Summit in Dublin, Ireland. I spoke with two top-notch consultants, Nancy Lincé and Jamie Harris, about FDA inspections, how to prepare, and what to avoid. The summit, if you don't know, is an annual European mecca for startups to make connections and raise funds. And it's also chock full of panels on topics intended to educate emerging companies on issues they'll face in the current medtech environment. Sure, there's plenty of financing chatter at the meeting, but there's also conversations on regulatory and policy topics that we specialize in at Market Pathways. And this year, one issue we decided to spotlight was inspections by the U.S. regulatory agency. Particularly as more and more companies are prioritizing a U.S. first market strategy in the face of a tough EU regulatory environment, it's crucial for device firms to be prepared for FDA to visit your facilities wherever in the world they may be. That's to maintain compliance and avoid enforcement actions, of course. But even more significantly, Nancy and Jamie underscored, quality and inspections preparedness is crucial for building long-term company value. So let's hear more directly from the experts from this April 18th chat we had in Dublin.
So I'm Nancy Lincé. I have been in the medical product industry for 32 years now. The first 9 of those, I was employed at companies like Guidant and Conceptus, where I worked at different roles in regulatory, clinical, and quality. And then in 2001, I founded Lincé Consulting, and we're a consulting firm that offers clinical, regulatory, and quality consulting to a variety of clients worldwide, ranging from small startups to large corporations. And I also am a coach and advisor for the Stanford Bioinnovative Design Program for the past 8 years, and an equivalent program in Brazil for the last 2 years.
Steve?
So I'm Jamie Harris. I'm currently a senior manager in regulatory affairs at ICON's Medical Device Consulting Group. I've been in the industry for a little over 27 years. I started out in biotech in quality assurance, so that's my first love. And I've been in regulatory for about 15 years, maybe a little longer. I'm working with a variety of class 1, 2, and 3 devices.
Great. Well, I think, makes sense. Just maybe start a little with the basics. Thinking about, why companies, the startups and the like in this type of room or elsewhere need to be, thinking about and obviously prioritizing FDA compliance and the type of issues addressed here, and things that FDA's role that companies may not be thinking about or not always thinking about in your experience. What are some of the top line things that come up for you?
Sure. So I'll start.
Yeah, sure.
Obviously, the reason to think about it is because if you're going to be in the U.S. market at all, or even just considering an exit strategy with strategics that are in the U.S. market, the FDA compliance is a requirement. So it's essential to start thinking about it early on, and also to set up a system that is appropriate for your organization's size and infrastructure, as well as a product risk, because not all quality management systems are alike. Certainly for the small startups, you would not try to put in a quality system that's, say, equivalent to the larger, J&J type, Abbott type, because it will cripple the company. So for sure, you need to get it in early, but it has to be appropriate for the size of your company.
But I want to add on that too. I think it's also important as you're building your quality system that you think about scaling up your company. If you want to grow, so you want to not limit yourself when you're setting up your quality management system. So think about that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I definitely want to go a little later go into more about that for your company appropriate size approach. But just in terms of thinking about FDA, there's different types of audits that companies come up against. Obviously, notified bodies, et cetera. Or how do you think? Is there any particular? Is FDA as it's a singular regulatory body? Thinking about it as an inspection force. What are the key factoids or points that companies should be maybe aware of?
I guess one of the big things is, right, you pay notified bodies, right? They kind of work for you. Or FDA, they're an enforcement agency. So that's the biggest difference, I think, right there.
Well, yeah, because notified bodies are buying for your work, where obviously FDA is not. So there is definitely a difference there, if that's what you were asking in terms of the differences between the notified bodies and FDA. Yeah, and so FDA's main purpose, obviously, is enforcement, promotion, and protection of public health. And so that's how they target things, and they're not, looking for your business.
Right.
Yeah.
How does that come across in terms of an inspection itself? They show up at the door.
Yeah.
This is not, is this a friendly matter, or where's that line?
So we were talking about that because we obviously both have different experiences, which are very overlapped, but it's different. Number one, you have to remember that, like I said, and like Jamie said, it's different than a notified body. In general, notified bodies will come in with a more collaborative approach than FDA. And, but also FDA is not, in my experience, coming in with guns ablazing, unless they have to. I'll get in a little bit, when we talk about the different types of inspections. But for the most part, especially the seasoned ones, they come in and they're reasonable as long as you have a system that's been implemented and that has been continuously updating, as Jamie says, and you're continuously improving. If they see that, they're going to be okay with what you're doing, even if you have some things to work on. What you do have to just be aware of is, over the last several years, FDA has hired thousands of new product reviewers and inspectors. And the newer ones in both areas, both the product evaluation, so when you go to submit your applications, they're reviewing your applications, or the inspectors that show up your door, the newer ones have something to prove, and so they might be a little bit more gung-ho about finding things. So you should just be aware of that when you get inspected, of who is there inspecting you.
A little psychology involved here.
Exactly.
But I think it's really important to emphasize, too, that FDA really is a consumer protection agency, right? They're not out to bust us, right? So or bust industry. It's like they really are trying to protect public health. So that's the main goal. And I think that's what we're all here for, is for public health, right? Well, right.
Unless they find something that they should be concerned about.
And again, that's protecting public health, right? So that's all of us, really.
Yeah. So yeah, you alluded to it, Nancy, and I think, and this gets a little bit at it, like, there's different reasons that, we say FDA inspection, but actually there's, inspection can mean a different number of things, depending on the circumstances, different of when and why and how someone might show up at your institution. And I should say, I meant to mention, whether you're in the U.S. or outside the U.S., this is, happened certainly during the pandemic. Things slowed down, but I assure you the data shows, numbers are popping back up in terms of mandatory inspection visits, whether it's both in the U.S. or outside the U.S. But, thinking about that, what are the different types of, reasons why FDA may be showing up?
Sure. So I'll start with that.
Go for it, yeah.
So I think the classic one is, I think what most people think about is the surveillance or the routine. And so that means once you're on the market, they're going to come out and make sure that your quality system is working and that you are producing quality products or services. And so by law, in theory, they're supposed to come out every 2 years. In practice, that's not practical because of the resource shortages. So they could come out at any time. I'll just give you a couple of my examples. There was one of our clients that was on the market since 2018. We just got a call last year that they were coming out. And in this case, the inspector was very nice. And we actually were doing a BSI audit for another client. And so we said, we can't accommodate when you're suggesting you come out. So she worked with us, and they actually didn't end up coming out till November. But then we had another client that over the summer, an inspector called on Thursday and said, I'm coming out on Monday. And we said, well, we're trying to get somebody there because it was at a different location where the quality management system was. And she said, I don't care, I'm showing up. And if you're not there, we're going to write you up. So we're like, okay, we shipped somebody over, flew them over from California to North Carolina. So the point is, you always have to be ready, but with how many medical device companies there are out there, FDA is short-staffed. So every 2 years is not really reasonable. And then other types of audits are pre-approval inspections. So if anybody's a class 3, those would apply when you apply for, say, a PMA application. As part of the review, FDA will send out a compliance team that, in addition to the group that's reviewing your application, they'll come out to your facilities, and that will be a part of your approval to make sure your quality system's up and running.
And presumably that's more predictable.
That's more predictable because they will plan that and they will work with you and organize that. And as part of that too, they can send out a different group with different expertise to review your clinical data. And they'll also send out compliance officers to your clinical sites to review them too. So that's what you have to keep in mind. And then, of course, the one that we don't want is a for-cause audit. And that just means that there's a reason why they're there, and that's never good.
Yeah. But also, typically, I think FDA typically notifies folks that they're coming out. So I think in the U.S., it's like, I think you get 5 days. OUS, 2 to 3 months because of travel and arrangements like that. So, but they can just show up at your door unannounced. I've had that experience, yes. So we had an experience. We had a manufacturing plant that was maybe 40 miles from our headquarters, our office. And they showed up at our manufacturing plant, not at the office where everybody was. We had a few manufacturing technicians there. Our quality person was actually working remote. So they showed up. We didn't have anyone designated to host them when they came in. So we got on the phone, got our quality manager, said, get up. She was 3 hours away, but we told her to get on the road and get to the office. But before she could get there, we got a 43 or observation. So have somebody ready
Have a backup
on site
plan for sure.
Yeah, first have someone there.
Have someone there.
First step,
Even if you can just entertain them and have something too ready for them when they get there to occupy them while you're scrambling in the back. So
Right. And is this something, I mean, that's presumably something that there's various people in the company need to be involved in terms of not just, maybe you have your quality person, but you have some, people on the floor, et cetera.
Actually, I recommend too, as you're preparing for your audit or setting up your quality management system, that you set up a team, an inspection team, so that and backups, and assign responsibility so people know who's running for, who's grabbing documents, who's doing the tour of the plant if that's necessary, all of those sort of things, and then identify your subject matter experts for your different processes as well, so that people aren't caught off guard, and your subject matter experts are going to be best to talk to the processes, right? So. You definitely want to have that set up.
It's key, too, to have a process, a procedure in place, and a checklist of, what is going to happen when an inspector comes in or inspectors come in. And like Jamie's saying, who is going to be involved, who's going to greet them, who's going to take them to the room, and who is going to screen the documents before they go to FDA. So that's critical to have a process in place and to practice to go through that so that you can be ready at any time.
Hey, have you heard of Market Pathways? Market Pathways provides the most in-depth analysis you'll find of the changes happening in medical device regulation and reimbursement every day. They address the complexity in regulatory affairs and beyond by helping you digest and contextualize technical topics like Medicare and MDR. Visit mystrategist.com/trial today to start your free 5-day trial to Market Pathways. Again, that's mystrategist.com/trial for 5 days of online access.
Everyone, I'm Joey Brenneman from Offscript Health, and we are excited to introduce you to Offscript Health's latest podcast series called Before We Die, the world's best podcast about the MedTech industry. Every day, advances in technology are providing new, less invasive options in healthcare. Many of them are born out of the idea that there has to be a better way. On this show, we will be talking with the rock star innovators and inventors of the medtech industry who felt the same way, which inspired them to create a new device or challenge a way that a procedure was done. And most people don't even know who they are. So download and subscribe to Before We Die, wherever you get your podcasts. You'll get full episodes every Tuesday, and on Thursdays, you'll get our Lab Before Slab mini episodes where Sandy, John, and Craig geek out about the latest happenings in the medtech world. Who would have thought that medical innovation could be so riveting?
Yeah. That takes us nicely into more just conversation about preparation for this. I mean, obviously, you can dig down really deep on sort of the systems involved here. I mean, historically, in the FDA, something the quality system regulation underlies a lot of the inspection, although that's transitioning right now over the next 2 years to something called the quality management system regulation, designed to be a little bit closer to the 1345, international standard, but not quite that, just closer. But in any case, the point is that that doesn't fundamentally. There's a lot of things involved. I'm curious on a practical level, maybe just what are the key systems, key focus areas that you feel like you hone in on most in terms of or top line issues that you hone in with companies in terms of having your quality system in place and inspection ready.
I don't mind taking that one. So your systems, I think the 4 systems you want to have in place first are your CAPA, corrective and preventive action. You want to have design controls, management controls, and then the production and process controls, so your manufacturing controls. And I'm going to add one more, document control, because document controls where all your evidence that you've done, what you said you're going to do, that's where that lives. So those are the systems I would focus on, definitely. FDA may not dive into the document control as much, but you also want to be careful to be careful about exposing your systems if you're using electronic document management system. Back in the day, and I'm thinking maybe 90s, early 2000s, we never showed our system, our electronic document management, to an inspector. I know in recent years, people are becoming more conscious, environmentally conscious, not printing as much, so just be careful there. But it's your CAPAs, which includes complaints, like I said.
But also just in general, like to be ready is to make sure that you have a robust system that's working in all areas, because a key as well is if you ever see the FDA chart, which has everything that Jamie spoke about in a circle, the middle one is management, and they're going to focus on that. And so that's also super key to have an effective quality management system, is to make sure the corporate culture is based on compliance and quality, and that it's not just a checkbox or a nuisance or a roadblock, but it's actually a tool that's meant to help the company do their job with no obscurity, because it's right there, it's laid out, and it's supposed to help the company and all the different functions do their job efficiently, so that you do end up with quality systems and, quality products and quality services.
What are some ways of making sure that's in place or ingraining that? I mean, I don't know. Obviously, there's some probably specific things like obviously, internal inspections, mock audits, things like that. But are there other maybe talk a little bit about what might be involved with that, or are there other key steps involved in sort of that type of preparation for ensuring you have your ducks in a row?
Yeah, again, it's managing a quality management system that's appropriate for your infrastructure. And so as part of that, like you mentioned, is the internal controls, internal inspections, making sure that those are happening on a regular basis, and that you're having a qualified person do it. You can't have somebody that's part of that system auditing it, so it has to be independent, and they should be qualified, and addressing any gaps that you find. Also part of that is the management reviews, because that's part of it, and identifying areas where you can improve in the process. And that's, again, all part of your controls, and making sure that they're being tracked and trended and reported to management, so that you can make the gaps visible and the needs visible, so that you can actually address them. And again, you will always want to have a closed loop system where you're identifying challenges or areas where you can improving them, and, as Jamie was saying, keep growing.
And ultimately, management is responsible for anything that happens in the company, right? So, so you have to have that management review, and that's your evidence that management is aware, right? So.
I will keep going on here, but I did want to say, if anybody did want to throw in a question, I'd be very happy to. Go ahead.
Pre-approval audit and pre-inspection. In terms
Mm-hmm.
And how often do they do that? And is your performance in the former one any sign of whether they'll skip a site audit for your clinical data?
It could be, but it's mostly to do with the product evaluation side. So if they have concerns, or if it's in an area where there's concerns in general, there's some concerns going on with warning letters and stuff from devices that have been in the field, and so that might impact you. But in general, they do try to get out to at least a couple of sites, and they do try to audit at least a portion of your clinical data during the PMA process.
Thanks. Yeah. So it always depends. Yeah. Any others for now? Okay, we'll keep going then. Feel free though. I'll watch. So yeah, I mean, I want to get a little bit towards maybe like thinking about this from the perspective maybe of smaller companies, and just the type of investments involved here and feasibility, et cetera. I mean, as people have maybe worked to some extent as outside consultant, but maybe also inside company, how much is this, the types of systems you're talking about, the types of practices, something that can really be done as an internal investment? How much outside help is needed? How feasible is this for a small company to kind of be making the types of investments you're talking about, as they're in early stages, as they're,
Well, from my standpoint, it's very feasible. Because again, it's a tool to help the company do their job efficiently, and the end result is quality products. And so the key is Jamie mentioned electronic quality management systems, and back in the day, if a small company wanted to invest in that, it was cost prohibitive because they're about $250,000, and obviously that didn't make any sense. Nowadays, they're much more affordable. There's companies out there that offer platforms for say a $20,000 upfront and then $300 to $900 monthly licensing fee. That, if it's reasonable for you, is a good investment because it's very efficient, especially for companies that have a lot of remote workers, and that is seeming to happen a lot. But if that is even cost prohibitive, then just stick with the old-fashioned, documentation or hard copy.
A paper-based system,
and that's just as efficient as well in terms of what you're trying to achieve. But it's critical that you invest in it, and in that case, it would be just a matter of investing in the right people to get your system developed, implemented, and maintained. And in terms of consultant versus, employee, again, it all depends on where you are. From my standpoint, coming from, a consulting organization, it's typically more cost efficient if you bring in a consultant at first because it ebbs and flows and you're not going to have a full-time person depending upon, again, your own infrastructure, your product risk, and the manufacturing complexity of your device. So it all depends in terms of, is it better to bring in a full-time person or a consultant?
I want to add to that too. It might also depend on where you're located, if you're remote or if people on site, because your pool that you're drawing from, right, the pool that you're recruiting from may not have the expertise. I've seen that happen. And you move into a new region where land's available, but the talent isn't, right, so much. So that's a different thing. And that's when you might want to look to consultants. If you don't have that talent available, you may want to bring in consultants at that point, at least to help you set up your management system, right? Because consultants have the experience and expertise to kind of bring that up fast. So that's always an option as opposed to hiring internally.
And then in terms of actually getting some of the doing those audits and things like that, you obviously need, your mock audits internal. You'll need outside help to some extent, having it or
you could. It all, again, it depends on what type of expertise you have available to you, but it can be done internally if you have independent quality compliance people that have the expertise. But yeah, you can often do it with an outside consultant that comes in that is completely independent and, as Jamie said, has a broad band of experience.
And for smaller companies too, if you don't have the resources where you're going to have that much independency, right? Definitely, I would hire outside, external, to come in and do the audits.
Yeah, and how early? I mean, you have obviously companies of a lot of range. You have some very early stage companies here, but how early do you need to be sort of segmenting some of these, approaches and investments? Is it just like, obviously you have an idea, at some point it becomes a company, and, when does this, when do you really have the rubber hit the road?
So I say that the time to do it is when the concept is frozen. So you don't want to put in a system when the R&D is under discovery, because you don't want to stop them. You want to keep them going. So let them use their lab notebooks and whatever. But the time management says that the concept is frozen is when you should start.
So when you say concept, are you talking design controls? Or just the concept
No, I'm saying the product
good.
concept.
Gotcha.
When it's frozen, then start, you should trigger the implementation of the quality management system. And of course, before that time, you should have a quality management system implementation plan in place that then gets triggered once management says, yep, this is a product we want to move forward with. And then you start with the staged approach at releasing the quality management system. And you would always start with document control, because that's the foundation of then that everything gets processed through.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and you alluded a little earlier, I think it's just looking at this not, as like a system that's going to help your company move forward. It's not just to make you look good to FDA.
Exactly.
That's obviously key.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, I wonder if we could spend a lot, talking about that a little bit. Like, companies are looking to exit, raise money, eventually get acquired. How could we, connect some of these concepts to, some of those things on people's minds? I don't know if you have, both of you have thoughts on that.
So again, it's like we said, it's a tool. That's the main purpose. Sometimes too, when clients come to us and they've never done this before, they might come from an area that's not medical device. They don't understand why they need it, and they keep focusing on FDA's requirements, FDA regulations, and I say, forget FDA, let's put them aside. You want to develop a quality product, right, for not only yourself, but first and foremost for the patients, and whether or not you want to market the product yourself or want to get acquired, that's going to be part of the due diligence for these strategics. That's one of the things our firm does too, is due diligence on both sides for the strategics coming in to audit the companies and then vice versa. And so that's going to be a big part of it, because at the end of the day, they are going to want a packet that they can take during the acquisition that they can pull into their system, and that, as Jamie said, is the evidence of what you produce. So it's critical because, again, it's a tool for your company to leverage, but also it's going to be required from the strategics.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I was going to say a lot of.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say,
ahead.
add to that is a lot of times people look at the quality management systems as they're not revenue generating, but I do want to add that they can actually save you money. So you definitely want to have a robust system in place.
Right. That is.
Well, and it will be a part of the evaluation.
Yeah.
Because like I said, I've been on both sides, and I've seen where they'll rip it apart, like the larger companies will come in and rip it apart if it's not solid enough. And again, they don't expect it to be like their quality system, but you have to show that you have a solid packet to support all the things that you're telling them your device is capable of doing.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. No, it does cost some money, but you're in the end, it's going to save you money, and it's going to
absolutely
great value. Is exactly. I think the key way of putting it. So we'll get to some maybe closing comments here, but I want to last check to make sure no questions or points of clarification. Okay. And yeah, so I mean, just overall, what's your top line? This is what you want to leave. Company, not a quality control professional, but some executive at a small company. A key investment, key takeaway, top line. Most important things you'd want to leave. People in this sector with in our final closing minute here, minute or two.
Sure. I would say invest in your people, right? I mean, it's one of the requirements. Forgive me for quoting the regs, but you definitely want to invest in people that have the right education, background, experience, and training. And then invest in training, because things are constantly changing and you need to keep up. So those are the two things I would say right off the bat.
Yeah, and I would just say to create a corporate culture where it comes from the top, that
Absolutely.
compliance is important. Again, it's not just a checkbox, but it is the corporate culture of your company, because I find the most challenging clients to work with are those where at the top they think it's a nuisance, and then it trickles down, and it's a real problem to try to overcome. And again, if you make it a priority and it trickles down, it's going to be much easier. And like Jamie's saying, invest in the right people, because like I said, I've also seen people put in these quality management systems that are top notch, they're bulletproof, but they're too large for the small companies and it will cripple them. And so that's not appropriate either. So you definitely have to put in a quality management system that is appropriate for your infrastructure and for the risk of your product and for the complexity of the manufacturing.
Right. So some great takeaways in terms of, top-down culture, right size fitting, training, and overall just thinking of this as a, holistic process for your company, while also staying in good graces with FDA and regulators like.
That's important.
Yeah,
Yes, it
absolutely,
is, yeah.
absolutely. With that, I think it was a great session. I appreciate both of you joining, and I
you.
appreciate y'all listening for our final session of the meeting. I think Steve will come up to take us home here, but thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you.
I enjoyed that, and I hope you got something out of it too. Check out my recent Compliance Corner article online on FDA inspections, and you'll also find coverage of FDA's ongoing transition from the Quality Systems Regulation to the new, more globally harmonized Quality Management System Regulation. There's also a whole lot more at mystrategist.com. For now, thanks for listening.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. Your support is valuable and makes us better. Please remember to leave a review and rate Market Pathways on Apple Podcasts or wherever you happen to listen.